Welcome again to another podcast of Fleshing It Out. I am your host, Levi Goldgrab, and I'm here with Rabbi Shaul Rosenblatt, who lives in Edgware, near London in the UK. Rabbi Rosenblatt actually came here a bunch of years ago and started Aish in the UK, and has since ventured on to other things. Rabbi Rosenblatt moved on to opening up an organization called Tikkun, which teaches mainly adult education, and he still runs that. Rabbi Rosenblatt has also, more excitingly, in addition, opened up the Rabbinical Training Academy, the RTA, which has opened up about 2.5 years ago and has seen its first cohort. The Rabbinical Training Academy, I guess, Rabbi Rosenblatt, can I call you Shaul?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're on. Shaul and I are in, we have already have a relationship outside of the podcast, so I'm comfortable with that. But the Rabbinical Training Academy, it's unique. I went through it. We just finished the first cohort. It's been 2 years. It's a really unique program. Can you first tell us just a bit about yourself, Shaul, like a bit about kind of your life journey, where you started, where you've come to, and then we could talk a bit about the this really unique program of the Rabbinical Training Academy that I've never seen anything even close to what it offers.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and give you the quick version of sort of my background. I was born in Liverpool, north of England, and I was brought up in I suppose what you call a secular traditional family. We went to shul maybe a couple of times a year, kept somewhat kosher at home, did Kiddush on a Friday night. That was probably the extent of our Judaism. I can't think of too much more than that. And at 17, I was 16, 17, I was introduced to a much more meaningful Judaism that spoke to me a lot more by a rabbi who came to my school in Liverpool. And I decided to go and study for a few weeks in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, to just I suppose, as I put it in my own mind, before I threw away my Judaism entirely, which is kind of the direction I was going in, to at least give it a chance and see kind of if it, yeah. Well, I wouldn't even say one more try. I don't think I've ever given it a try in the first place.
Right.
Give it a go, and I went for 6 weeks to Israel. I was planning on going to university in America. I had dreams of becoming an astronaut. Maybe that's the direction I was wanting to go in.
Okay.
And I had a scholarship actually to study aeronautical engineering at Caltech, which is one of the top technical universities over there.
Oh, really?
And after 6 weeks in yeshiva, I just decided this is kind of a direction that I need to move in. This means something to me. This matters. There's something real here. There's something genuine here. There's some underlying truth in this that I have to pursue. And so I ended up staying for 6.5 years in Aish in Jerusalem. I got smicha, and then decided that it was at a time where Aish was quite small globally. They had maybe 3 or 4 branches around the world. In North America, and I saw that I felt like, given my own experience in England, given my upbringing, I looked at my family, I looked at my friends, I felt like it was a shame. It was saddened me to see that people wouldn't have the opportunity that I had. So I felt a real burning sense of responsibility to come back to England and try and set something up over here. And obviously Aish was the place I knew and the place I'd been involved with. So
there had been no previous setup of any organizations or
well, sort of outreach was in its infancy in the UK. This was 1991, and you had the JLE, sort of was a bit of a one-man band. Danny Kirsch and Rashi Simon was doing some outreach in Little Venice. He had an organization there, which eventually actually combined with the JLE. Seed was around, again on a very small level. There wasn't what you see today, you know, these big successful organizations reaching out to thousands and thousands of people. It was more of a bit of a cottage industry outreach. And so I kind of came and started Aish, which really took off very quickly. I think it was the right time and the right place for it. And after a number of years running Aish, I think it was 12 years I ran Aish for. I wanted to move on to new horizons. I mean, a lot I could say about that, about what was behind that and why, but I'm giving you the shortened version. And my setup, as you said, Tikkun, and my goal was to create an organization that taught Judaism in a way that wasn't pushing people, didn't have an agenda, wasn't trying to convince people of anything, rather share with them something that was beautiful and precious, and in the hope, or with some level of confidence, that Jews would be interested in meaningful Judaism.
Can you talk a bit about that? What you mean by kind of not coming up from a place of coercion or having to convince someone of an idea, but kind of presenting to them what's there and believing that if you're presenting a truth, people will follow that idea.
Yeah, well, kind of exactly as you said it there. You articulated that very nicely. It's a belief that you know, up until then, my approach had been one of I'm going to prove to you that Judaism is true, and if I prove to you that it's true, then now you got to keep it because it's proven and it's truth and it's reality. And
Right.
that was kind of, and I felt, you know, that's the obvious way to sort of change people and to get them involved and engaged. And again, there's a lot behind this, and there's a lot more I'd have to say, but I realized that people aren't as simple as that. People aren't robots. You know, we're not programming computers over here. It doesn't work like that. That people are sophisticated sort of beings, systems, and you have to work with them as they are, such as they are. You have to work with their humanness, and you have to work with your own humanness as well. Realize that you're not a robot either. You know, I'm not a robot. I have my own weaknesses and my own humanness also, and I have to see that in others. And so to just come and say, here, flick a switch, you know, now you know Torah is true, so now keep it all from Aleph to Taf, you know, it just doesn't work with people. And so I realized that what I want to do is, no, it just doesn't work with people. I don't think it's right. I think people have free will. You know, God put us in this world for us to make choices, for us to be independent, live our own lives. Now, education isn't about, at least the way I see it, isn't about forcing people into a corner, but it's about giving them choices. I felt like when I was growing up in Liverpool, I didn't have a choice. The only thing I knew was a Judaism that there's no way I could make a choice to be interested in. In fact, I think I would have been quite, I wouldn't have respected myself very much if I'd chosen to be engaged in that Judaism.
Right.
Because why would I? What did it have to offer me? So I want to give people a choice and say to them, here's what Judaism is. Here's how meaningful it is, how valuable it is, how true it is, how wise it is. Go and do what you want with it. It's yours. You know, make your choices about it. You ask me, I think it's a really good idea, and it makes a lot of sense to be an Orthodox Jew. But that's me. You go decide where you want to go with it. And I think whilst I think that's a very it's a way of teaching with a lot of integrity, I think it has a side benefit as well. And the side benefit is that you don't put people off.
Right.
Is that, you know, I was finding that the way I was educating until then, whilst there were people I was getting involved in Judaism, there were people I was putting off as well, who didn't like the idea of us telling them what to do and what they should be doing and how they should be living their lives. They didn't want to be told that.
Right.
And so I feel like it's just a way that I've been doing this I set up Tikkun 15 years ago now, and I just enjoy the process of education so much more. and I feel so much more comfortable with the whole way we're doing it than I kind of did in the past.
I guess it feels a lot more real. It feels a lot more authentic.
Yeah, authentic. That's the word I've been looking for. I
Mm.
think it's more authentic. It's more realistic way of sharing ideas with people.
Right. It's funny because you mention it in context of the non-religious community, or what
Yeah,
where the religious community would call non-from community.
yeah,
But you mentioned that they wouldn't make a choice to take on more religious practice or be involved more with spiritual practice, let's say
yeah,
in Judaism, because it's not, like you said, it's not presented in a way that was something that was meaningful, is more kind of convincing
yeah.
or coerced, like you said. Which is funny because you find it the other way as well. You find it in the religious Orthodox community as well, where it's not that they wouldn't make the choice because it's not presented like that, but it's that if you grew up in a religious family, you obviously haven't made the choice, and that's kind of what you're brought up with, and that works, and that's great. But then there are people who grew up and it works and that works. They fit into that mold, and there are people who grew up and like maybe they weren't taught the essentials, the fundamentals, or wasn't presented to them in a way where it was like you mentioned, it wasn't being coerced or it wasn't being convinced. It was being set out in front of you, and you get to make you get to make, not that you get to make the choice, but that as well, but that you come from an educated place, and you're practicing Yiddishkeit, Judaism, from an educated spiritual place, rather than from a place that it's just been put on you because you just ended up in this world, right?
Yeah.
So which is interesting, because I guess that would that be an aspect as well as tikkun, and maybe that can bring us also to the RTA, the Rabbinical Training Academy. Because like I said, I'll let you speak. I mean, because
No,
you
that's
kind
okay.
of it's Shaul, it's your baby, the RTA. But from my experience from the past 2 years of being on the program, I've realized that that there is a gap that can be missing, not just in the non-religious, or let's say non-observant world, where they can take on more practice, more meaningful practice, but also in the religious world where people can take on more meaningful practice rather than robotic, as you called it, robotic practice. So I'm curious how you see that in the world that we live in, so to speak, the world, kind of the cultural, the group, so to speak. And again, I don't like labels, but kind of the community that we find ourselves in. How do you see that playing out in that community?
When you say the community, you mean the Orthodox world, yeah? The
Orthodox world.
Haredi, let's say, but broader than the Haredi world. The Shomer Shabbos world, let's say.
Yeah, you can call it that, yeah.
I'm going to take a step back for a minute and just sort of philosophize for a moment, if I may. Because I've always, since I started in my journey in Judaism, I've been bothered by the question of like, what I don't know how to put this, but what's God got in mind? Why did he allow this to happen? Why did he allow 90% of the Jewish people to sort of disconnect and get sort of lost from Judaism, from Jewish values and Jewish ideas? Possibly more than 90%. What's not so disrespectful here, but what's he playing at, God? Doing that in the nicest possible of ways. What's going on? And I'm not claiming I have the answer to that question at all. Not a Novi, I'm not a B'nai Nevi'im either. But I feel like, I look back at what the rabbis tell us about Purim, the Jewish experience of Purim, that because there was some lacking at Mount Sinai in the Jewish people's commitment to Torah. God held the mountain over them, and they felt compelled. And compulsion is not a good way to get people to make real commitments. It doesn't come from the heart, compulsion. And as we know, the Gemara tells us, God wants the heart above all else. He wants our hearts. And so the Jewish people went through the experience of Purim as a means through which they, kimu v'kiblu, they made a new commitment. And it was a much more real commitment. It was a much more genuine commitment. It was a much deeper commitment. I kind of feel in some way this is part of the history of the Jewish people as well, this period in these past couple hundred years, we'll probably look back on it, I hope, and see that Judaism had become rote. We'd lost a lot of the heart of it. We'd lost a lot of the feeling of it. And that's why it was so easy when the Enlightenment came along for just whole swathes of the community to just disappear off the map, because they didn't have a connection to it. They would go through the motions, but they weren't connected in a real, in a deep, in a meaningful way. And the solution to that, in my mind, I'm suggesting, is the Jewish people kind of gets really lost and then has to find its own way back, and has to find its own way back to God, and its own way back to connection, and its own way back to truth. And you get a much stronger, more robust and committed, genuine and real community, as a result of that. I mean, we Jews are fans of, it's one of our Yud Gimel principles of faith, the Mashiach, That to me is the pathway to Mashiach, is the pathway to the Messiah, that the Jewish people have to be committed. Committed not in a superficial way, not in a mitzvahs anashim lemudam, this is what my parents did, this is what my grandparents did, but committed in a way where they see the truth in it, and they want to do it, and they care about it. And I think that this, let's see, it's in front of us, not behind us, so it can't look and see what happened. But it looks to me like that's the direction that kind of God would want us to go in. That's what this period of time is about. And I think, as you're saying, it's true for the Orthodox world as well. I think the 10% that stayed didn't necessarily stay because they saw the meaning in it. They stayed because they were just very committed. They stayed because they had some sense of what the Jewish people is about, that you couldn't shake them no matter what. That's a real quality there, but it doesn't mean to say they understand what it's about, and it doesn't mean to say they can pass that on to their children or have been able to do so. So it looks to me as though perhaps what it'll be the job of these 90% sort of coming back to a truer and deeper sense of Judaism that will ultimately impact that 10% that stayed loyal, that will lift them into a more meaningful sense of what Judaism is about. That's
really interesting, because it's like the 10% were kind of self-preservation. After, especially with the Enlightenment, and then especially after the Holocaust, right, following some time after that, and what we call the Orthodox community, or the religious community, we fell into this kind of self-preservation mode, to keep us alive, which is great, because that's how you keep something going. But when you fall into self-preservation mode, you also kind of lose focus sometimes on where the meaning's supposed to be, or what the purpose of what you're doing is, because there's so much focus on self-preservation. And I'm not saying self-preservation is wrong. I'm just saying that it's not the only thing that's there.
Well, I think we're out of date with the self-preservation mode. I understand the time of the Enlightenment, and to some extent the time of the Holocaust, and even a little bit post-Holocaust, self-preservation. We've just got to keep it going. And but you can't continue with self-preservation. Self-preservation doesn't perpetuate itself. You don't, if you look at the secular community, it's had this problem as well, is that what has kept sort of secular Jews Jewish for the past 70, 80 years, in my mind, there's only really been two things that have kept them engaged and involved. One has been never again, the Holocaust.
Right.
Anti-Semitism, we've got to fight anti-Semitism. And the other has been Israel, which is really an extension of the same thing. It's we need a state so that next time the anti-Semites come along, we've got somewhere to go. We can stand on our own 2 feet. We can defend ourselves. It's a very negative kind of sense of what Judaism is about. It's like, what are we teaching our kids? Be Jewish because the non-Jews are going to come and kill you, number one. And number two, we've got to build a state for next time they try. It's like, right. Oh, great. That sounds like really big reasons to be Jewish. I'm really motivated and really excited. And when I have to fast 25 hours on Yom Kippur, I'm really enthusiastic about doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, how does that work? So a self-preservation mode doesn't really educate people into what it means or what it's about, which is what you need for genuine, sustainable education. It's not sustainable. It doesn't grow. It doesn't develop. It doesn't change self-preservation. And I agree. It's been a lot of fear. It's been, and it remains, batten down the hatches. But I feel like we live in different times. We live in different times. We can, I'm always, I'm never a fan of, we Jews who, but what's the old joke about the guy who stops reading the Jewish papers and he starts reading the non-Jewish papers? His friend says to him, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "Well, I read the Jewish papers and it's all about how the world hates us and it's anti-Semitism and we're being destroyed and there's attacks here, attacks there, and attacks elsewhere. I read the non-Jewish papers, it's all about how we Jews are taking over the world and we've got loads of money."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, why do I want to read the other stuff?
Exactly.
And I feel it's kind of the same type of thing. It's like, you read the Jewish papers. It's all about. It's funny to me. I love kind of. I could do if I had the time, I'd love to do an analysis of, let's say, the Jewish Chronicle, but it's not the only guilty party, the Jewish Chronicle, over the past 20 years, whereby you see the headline one year is anti-Semitism on the rise in England, and then you'll see the headline the next year is Manchester has the highest incidence of anti-Semitism in 10 years. Now behind the headline of Manchester having the highest incidence of anti-Semitism is the fact that England's actually gone down. That's why they've got to choose Manchester now. You've got to say Manchester, or there's been the highest level of violent attacks against Jews. Well, that means that verbal attacks have gone down and attacks on in the internet have gone down. You'll always hear people say this is the worst ever time and there's so much anti-Semitism and we're suffering so much and Mashiach must be around the corner because it's just all so terrible. We have no perspective on history. We Jews seem to forget pretty quickly kind of what we've been through.
Yeah, it's like coronavirus is like people are ready for Mashiach with coronavirus. And meanwhile, look back 70 years ago, we went through the Holocaust.
I was going to say, let's tell people in the Warsaw Ghetto, on the 18th of April, 1943, when the Nazis are liquidating it finally, let's go and tell them that, we're sitting here watching Netflix during a coronavirus outbreak. So, please, how do I get there? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Do you think? So I think about this sometimes. I think sometimes. Do you think that anti-Semitism is used again? Of course, there's anti-Semitism in the world. There's no denying that, and I don't want to downplay that at all. But do you think that it's used sometimes by us as a tool? Like we said, that's what you're saying, but to self-preserve, kind of, because it's something like. I wouldn't call it a victim. I don't know if it's I wouldn't call it a victim mentality really, because there is anti-Semitism and we have been persecuted throughout the generations terribly. But this idea that we always keep on pushing, why can't we push something else? Like I think there's a different message that we could push as a community rather than pushing the message always of this guy. Oh, this politician said something anti-Semitic or that one, and it has to be dealt with. But it doesn't mean that it's, like you said, always looking for the statistics of anti-Semitism's on the rise, and what are the statistics really, and what's the purpose of using the statistics?
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. You see, what attracted me when I first came to Aish in Jerusalem, one of the things that really brought me in was Aish's mission statement. And I don't know if that's the mission statement to Aish today or not, but it was certainly at that time. Its mission was to reawaken the Jewish people to its ancient mission of being a light to the nations.
Right.
Now that to me was inspiring. That to me was uplifting. That to me was like, wow, I'd love to be a part of that. There's an ancient mission over here. You're part of something great. You're part of a nation that has gone a long way in civilizing this world and still has quite a way to go, but has the wherewithal to do it. It's like that. What else would I want to do in my life? Can you tell me something? Well, I'm going to go astronaut, get the moon, and it's like, What's versus I can be a part of a 3,500 year history and destiny of bringing our world to godliness. That sounds a bit more interesting to me than going to the moon once or twice. It's just that's what touched me. And I feel our message has been so negative over the years, and in recent years. I don't know how long it's been, 100 years, 200 years, but we've had such a negative message in our educational system, both secular and Orthodox, but in different ways. So for example, I was chatting to a guy more recently. I've only seen this more and more in recent years, but that's just me. I believe it's not that it is more and more. I've seen it more and more. Chatting to a guy who's a very frum guy, went through the whole yeshiva system. And he tells me really the only reason he keeps Torah is because he's terrified he's going to go to hell if he doesn't. And if he would know that he could keep Torah, and this is a really, really, on the surface, committed, serious, frum guy, he told me that if he would know that he wasn't going to hell, get away with it, he'd go and eat a McDonald's tomorrow. What's the problem? Why not? What are the reasons is to do this? My rabbi used to say, my Rosh Yeshiva, Weinberg, Rosh Shalom used to say, you look at the Rambam, well, not just the Rambam, everybody, they say Yira, serving God out of fear, is avodah gerua, they call it. It's a lowly way of serving God. And my rabbi used to put it in a very nice way. He used to say, what's the problem with it? So the problem with it is that if the devil paid you more, you'd work for him instead, basically. Yeah. It's, because that's what it is. It's like, I'm only doing it. It's only self-interest, self-preservation. I'm a mercenary, that's all. And mercenaries work for the highest bidder. Right. So God happens to be the highest bidder. So I'm going to have to keep it. But you create a very unhealthy society, number one. But number two, a non-enthusiastic society. They'll go through the motions, they'll do what they need to do. You rip the heart and soul out of it if that's kind of how you're bringing up people to be.
And it's funny. I mean, it's funny because it's self-destructive. We talked about preservation, and at the same time as trying to preserve yourself, the mechanism you're using for that is kind of being self-destructive. I mean, if there's anything to look at, it's numbers of how it's the community's kind of been dwindling over the past 150, 200, even 300 years, starting from the Enlightenment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have to kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and say, should we be changing course a bit? And everything stays the same, the frame, the structure, but just the mindset and kind of where we're headed and what the education.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's got to change.
When we come to it, when we look at it, in spite of the Jewish Chronicle and what anybody else might say, we live in the absolute best times of Jewish history. We have never had it better. We have never been more accepted, recognized, protected. When it comes to anti-Semitism, you wouldn't want to live at any other time in Jewish history. If you're looking by the yardstick of anti-Semitism, there's no other time you want to live. We have freedoms like we've never had before. To me, it's an opportunity. We've been constantly looking over our back for 2,000 years in this exile. We stop trying to find the problems and start looking. We've got some freedom now to think about, well, how do we build a brighter future for ourselves? Instead of just defending what we've got, we have something to build now. And I think that if we build something that is really along the lines of what I was talking about earlier, sense of the greatness of the Jewish people, of what we have to offer the world, the world is struggling in many ways, and we have solutions to that. At least we have the kalim, the wherewithal to find those solutions. I think we can build, a direction in Judaism that will touch and inspire coming generations, such that we won't need to kind of force them, and we don't need to you don't need hell anymore. You don't need, those concepts there. People will be eager. People will be interested. People will feel a sense of in my mind, Jews are idealists. Jews are natural idealists. And you've just got to point them in the right direction. You know, the communist revolution in Russia was led by Jews. You know, absolute disproportionate number of Jews. The civil rights movement in America was fueled by Jewish lawyers. You know, all the lawyers that gave pro bono work, a massive percentage of them were Jewish. The feminist revolution was so many Jews in there. These animal rights movements, you know, you go and look where there's idealism. You go and look for idealistic movements, you will find Jews. You'll find Jews there, because that's what we are. Well, how tragic is that the most idealistic movement in the history of mankind, Judaism, nothing even comes close.
Yeah.
We're not just looking at saving some whales or women having equal rights or blacks having what they deserve. We're looking at humanity having a relationship with our Creator. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at human beings reaching the heights of human greatness, and Jews aren't interested in it. And those same idealistic Jews are not interested because they don't realize that's what it is. They just have never been taught that. The minute you taught me that, I was ready to go. Yeah. The minute somebody said to me, look, we're about reawakening the Jewish people to its ancient mission of being light to the nations, I'm like, I'm on board.
Yeah.
And Jews would be on board as well if they only understood that's what it's about.
So I guess that brings us to the RTA and
yeah.
kind of the purpose of the RTA.
Yeah.
So can you just tell us a bit? And it's a great segue. Well, I was going to ask you what was the need? What need were you filling with creating the RTA? And it's kind of what we were just talking about in a way.
It is what we're talking about. And
so can you tell us just a bit of the need and what it is and why you kind of came to make that like your life mission at this point?
Yeah. You see, what I did was, when I sort of started Tikkun, I made a conscious choice of quality over quantity. That I don't just want to try and get, convince loads of Jews to be more Jewish, and maybe keeping Shabbat and keeping various mitzvot, but not have any feeling behind it. Let's just create more of the same. I felt like I want to sort of educate towards developing Jews who have a real deep sense of who they are and what they are, and what Judaism is and how it matters to them.
Right. And
I realized that I wasn't going to do that with the masses, at least initially, because I'd seen I hadn't been doing that. You know, I wasn't developing individuals. Maybe that quite possible just lacking in me, but I have to be honest about it. So I said, I'm going to go for quality over quantity. I don't care if it's only a few people. I'm going to make sure that they really get a deep sense of what Judaism is. And if we've got a few people out there in the community with that sense, perhaps it will move beyond that. And then I realized as kind of my journey kind of went, and as I developed and as my understanding grew, it occurred to me that actually, if I'm only going to focus on a small amount of people, the best place to focus would be on influencers, on leaders, on people that can go and get the message out there to others. And I looked around and I just felt like, as I see young new rabbis coming into the system, I just don't believe that it's the same thing. They're going through that same educational system, so I don't see why they should be any different. I just didn't feel we were developing new leaders who were able to educate for the new generation, with a new and exciting sort of direction for Judaism, something that would inspire young Jews of today, something that would touch them in a deeper way, in the way that I've been talking about until now.
A hopeful direction for the Jewish people, basically.
Yeah, exactly. A hopeful, uplifting sense of the potential of our future. I felt like it was just more the same. You were just getting new rabbis who were coming through and were just teaching the same old thing that the old ones were teaching in the past. It was perpetuation of kind of the situation that we've got, battening down the hatches again. So I felt like if I'm going to focus on just a small number of people, the best place to go is going to be rabbis. It's going to be young, new rabbis who are sort of the future of our community, the future leadership of our community, who can go out and be influencers. And the thing that inspired me, and it does to this day, was Rabbi Akiva. You know, if you know the story of Rabbi Akiva, he had 24,000 students, and they all died in the plague because, as the Gemara tells us, they didn't respect each other enough. So whichever way you want to look at it, you know, and get into the ins and outs, but for some reason, Rabbi Akiva's education didn't work on some level. For some reason, he didn't touch his students or point them in the direction of what it's really all about, such that God felt that this isn't working. You know, his system didn't work. It's certainly that Gemara to me is an indictment of Rabbi Akiva, because he was the Rebbe, he was the teacher, he was the one responsible for them, and they all died. And I think that my sense is Rabbi Akiva got a message from that. I'm sure he was. He was a great man. Of course, he would listen to what Hashem's saying to him, to how Hashem's speaking to him. And he went out and he changed his whole tactic, completely new track. And he went and found 5 people. And those people were Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Shimon Bar Yochai, and Rabbi Elazar ben somebody. I can't remember which one it was. A few Elazars around.
Yeah.
And from those 5 students, those 5 students created the Mishnah. Those 5 students are the bedrock of the Mishnah, the bedrock of our Torah Shabbat Peh, of our oral tradition, that really created the foundation of Judaism for the next 2,000 years. What he couldn't do with 24,000 students, he did with 5. And that, to me, really speaks volumes to me. We Jews have always been about quality, not quantity. You know, we're a small nation. Doesn't matter we're a small nation. My Rebbe, my Rosh Hashiva, always used to say, give me 10 men and I'll change the world. But they got to be men. They've got to be the real deal. They got to be responsible. They got to be Moser Nefesh. They've got to be idealists. They got to be quality. I kind of feel the same way. We're not a numbers game. We're about, you know, the Mishnah says that there were 10 generations from Adam until Noah. And they were all getting worse and worse and worse until God brought the flood.
Right.
And then there were 10 generations from Noah until Avram. They're all getting worse and worse and worse until Avram Avinu came and Kibbutz Schar Kulam, got the reward of them all. Now, reading between the lines of that Mishnah, I've always felt, it's funny, this is an idea that I said at my Chag HaSmichas when I became a rabbi sort of almost 30 years ago. So you see the direction I was looking in even then. I said that if you read between the lines of that Mishnah, they were getting worse for 10 generations and God brought a flood. Then they were getting worse again for 10 generations and God didn't bring a flood. It seems like they were worse then than they were when he brought the flood.
Right.
So what happened? What's the difference? There's only one difference, and that is Abraham. Abraham lived in that generation. And somehow, some way, he saved his entire generation. That's the power of one individual. That's the power of one Abraham, of one great man, of one great human being, can impact the world in such a way that in one generation there's a flood and in another generation there isn't.
And he brought monotheism to the world, which is the greatest task he could have done at the time.
That's right. And that's why the world was worthy of continuing. You know, it's where God felt like, you know, we've got something to build on here because of Abraham. So that's one human being. I feel that with the RTA, my goal is to invest in individuals who I'm hoping will become future leaders, who I'm hoping will become the type of leaders that our community needs for its future, that will point it in a direction that will inspire young Jews to want to come along and be involved.
So the RTA, so we're Rabbinical Training Academy. We're training rabbis for the next generation of rabbis for the next generation, and in a more meaningful, impactful way.
Yeah,
What does a week or a day really look like in the RTA? Because it is unique,
yeah,
and it would be a shame to miss out on the unique kind of part of it
yeah,
for our listeners. Can you give us like a typical day or a typical week, a few things that occurred during the week, or how schedule might look?
yeah.
Um,
Well, so there's the learning. And the learning is, at least in last year's program, but we're kind of switching it around, but I'll stick with last year's program. That was the morning. The morning was learning. And the goal of the learning is not just to kind of keep guys in learning or to, because you have to learn, that's what we Jews do. It's more, I wanted to point the learning in a particular direction. I want, and I don't feel they necessarily have had any experience of this before. It's like a learning whereby you are absolutely and fully engaged and committed in the traditional sources, the Gemara, the Rishonim, the Shalas and Chuvas, but you're looking to see, what does this say to me? What's God telling me here? When I come to the conclusion on this, let's say we learned the concept of Kiddush Hashem, of sanctifying God's name, one of the sugyas, one of the areas that we learned. At the end of it, I want guys to kind of think about, what's that saying to me? How am I meant to sanctify God's name? What does it tell me about my life and about how I should live and about what my relationship with this world is meant to be and what my responsibility as a Jew is? So to me, that's what learning Torah is about. That's what I learned from my Rebbe, that's how you learn. You've got to personalize it, and you've got to understand that God's speaking to you. He's telling you how to be a greater human being. He's telling you how to be a human being that can go out and make a difference in the world. That's what Torah is there to point us towards. But if you don't learn it in that way, you might by accident kind of benefit, but you're not going to benefit in the way that you could and you should. So that's the first element. We have learning in the morning that's really focused on that. We learn the sugya of lishma. What does it mean to be sincere? What does it mean to keep Torah for the right reasons? What are the right reasons for keeping Torah, and how do you do that? So the areas that we're learning are very practical and very real,
right.
and very day-to-day sort of human experience.
Yeah, and the kind of the, just so that everyone knows, the lead up to it is that we like you said, we the program learns all the Gemaras, all the Rishonim of the Achronim, all the Shalos Chuvas, all the contemporary rabbis and previous, and in leading up to that, so it's halachic. It's very halachic along the process, and we'll spend 2 to 3 months just on one topic, like you said, Kiddush Hashem or something like that. But what you're saying is that it's focused on coming into conclusion where we can make it real and practical to our life, because halacha halacha actually means it's like a path. It's a path to bring you somewhere. And for some reason we've kind of, our education has left out in certain areas a bit of the path of it, and we've kind of focused. We've had a lot of direct focused on the law aspect of it. And if you can pair that together, the halacha law aspect with the path aspect of halacha, I think that's the full package of what the Torah is. Yeah,
absolutely. And then maybe in the afternoon we might have a let's say a session, a lecture, or a discussion on what we call the 3 principles, which is a very integral part of the program. It is an approach to spirituality. It's an approach. It's a very practical approach to pointing people towards their own souls, towards their own sense of connection. Because in my mind, you impact people to the extent to which you have what to give. You can only give what you have yourself. There's a story someone told me once about a guy who he met at a party, and he was chatting to him, and the guy told him he'd been divorced 7 times. And it's like, well, that's pretty impressive. And he said, what do you do? He says, I'm a marriage therapist. It's like marriage therapist. Like, what do you know about marriage?
Exactly. He could tell people how not to have marriage.
Well, exactly. Yeah, you can do that. But so I believe that I want to develop our rabbis as people. I want them to be healthy, grounded, spiritually connected individuals. So that will be another element of the program. Then we might go and do a visit to hospice, let's say. I feel that when we started the program, I asked the rabbis, there were 5 of them at the time, and their wives as well, a list of questions just to see what they understood and knew about the world outside. And I asked them, what's a hospice? And I think 8 of them didn't know. One of them said it's a home for abused children. It's like, not just they don't know what a hospice is, it's like, there's one thing to just know, yes, it's a place where people who are terminally ill go to for support, for the last period of their life. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to get touched by it. Touched by the human suffering and the human connection. And I want them to be real human beings who see real human beings in their lives. And so what we do is go to hospice, and then we have a real discussion afterwards of what did you see there, and what did you get moved by, and what did you learn, and what did it mean to you? And these group discussions are a really powerful part of the program because it draws the group together, but we learn from each other. And I think that learning from each other is so important in life, to know that we don't just learn from people who are above us and greater than us. Sharing with everybody has something to learn from us, something to teach us. Ezu Chacham, who's the wise man? Person who learns from everybody. And I also like the idea that these rabbis go to this hospice, and you have a sort of a non-Jewish Christian chaplain there who speaks to us about his role in the hospice, and he was absolutely incredible. He was just so sensitive and so caring and so loving and so wise. And to see that, for them to see there's a world out there. It's not just a little box of Judaism. It's not just a little box of a Jewish world over here. There's a big wide world out there, and there's wisdom out there, and there's valuable things to learn out there, and there's values, and there's truth out there as well. So that's that. And then maybe in the evening, we might have a
well, what's just before that? Can you give us just like a handful of other places that that the group has visited as being part of the program?
We went to a psychiatric ward, sort of a locked psychiatric ward. We went to a prison. We went to all sorts of Jewish organizations like Jewish Care to see what they do. Or we had somebody. We went to a mosque, and met with the imam over there. I mean, it's a very, very broad range. We had a Christian theologian from Cambridge come and speak to us about the Trinity. What does the Trinity mean to Christians, and what is that? And
that was just to clarify. That was part of a that was part of the kind of the sugyo, the discussion we were talking about around that topic in learning in the morning. So exactly. we had a guy come in and kind of, if you're like they say in the Bezdin used to back in the day used to look at kind of the different black magic things that the witches used to do to be able to give a halachic psak on that, halachic conclusion of what you can do or not can do. So that was kind of part of that sugya, to like hands-on to see like what's going on in a way.
Well, because the question in the sugya is, in Jewish definition, is Christianity idol worship, And the crux of that is, well, it looks like it is at first glance. You've got, I was just seeing yesterday that I was reading about this murderer who was executed, and his final words were, "I pray to you, Mary, Mother of God." That doesn't go down well to the Jewish ear. Mary, the Mother of God. On face value, the Trinity sounds like it could be fit into the classical Jewish definition of idol worship. So I wanted this guy to come and tell us and understand what the Trinity is. And is it idol worship? And it's not as black and white as it sounds at first glance. Not as obvious that would fit into what we would call a Avodah Zarah. And it's the subtleties that I'm trying to, the subtleties of looking at the world, or looking at what you see out there, and trying to see a deeper sense of what it's about, and make judgments, if you have to make judgments, based on not just based on what you see in front of you. Because it's a superficial way of seeing the world, and I want rabbis to be deeper than that, and to be more sophisticated and more sensitive than that. And then in the evening, and I have to finish, Levi, I apologize, I'm having to talk more at a later date, but in the evening maybe we would have a group meeting, let's say, with a group of people who have attempted suicide, let's say. And again, the idea is to hear from them what was in their minds and what was in their hearts that drove them to such a decision. Partly the idea is because rabbis, unfortunately, are going to be coming into contact with people in this situation, and to have them sensitive to it and understand it and appreciate what it is. But more than that, I just want them to get touched by the humanity of human beings. In my mind, if that's all that happens on this program, is that these rabbis get touched by humanness, by human beauty, by human godliness, by human greatness, and they see that in human beings as a whole, and they see it in themselves, I feel we've done a great job. I mean, there's a lot more I'd like to happen than that, but that to me is just so.
That's already world changing. Yeah.
Yeah, that itself would be world changing if people could kind of get touched by that and see that and feel that.
That's amazing. So Shaul, I know you got to go, and you wanted to say something.
No. I just want to say, like I said, I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to continue a different time. Just one last. When we have, there's a few more topics I'd love to speak to you about. Maybe we'll hold up for a different episode. One last question, just that I kind of ask all the guests that come on. The name of the podcast is Fleshing It Out. Kind of, which means to detail stuff out, talk it over, discuss it. If there was one person from the past, present, any point in time that you would have the chance to flesh it out with, sit down, talk something over with, just go through one person, and it doesn't have to be the person, but because I'm putting you on the spot here a bit. But
I have, it's a funny thing because I get touched by so many people in Jewish history, and it almost, as I think of it, it brings tears to my eyes almost to think of certain people I'd love to just sit in the room with them. Fleshing it out would be the secondary benefit. I just love to sit in a room and feel them there, feel the greatness of their soul, be in their presence. But yes, the obvious one that jumps out at me is Rabbi Akiva. I named my first son Akiva after him.
Right.
I just feel like there was something about him, just the name itself, it's an iconic name. He's an iconic human being in Jewish history. I just feel like I just love to know who he was and what he was and why he was, and see what I could learn from that. Massive amounts to learn from that. So yeah, he would be my man. As a second person, I don't want to be greedy here, but I would say Sarah Schneerer would potentially be number 2 on my list. Yeah, because I love the fact that Sarah Schneerer stood up, saw truth, and followed it, in spite of pressure against it, in spite of oppression of those who supposedly were greater and wiser, but she saw what she saw, and there was no avoiding it. She saw what she saw, and she had to follow in the direction of truth that she'd seen. I'd love to hear more about that. I'd love to hear from her how that worked and how you do that. So those would be
like 2 good choices.
Yeah. But my list would be, who knows.
Your list is forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Well, thank you, Shaul, for coming on. Thank you, Rabbi Rosenblatt. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thanks for giving up your time. I know you're busy, but hopefully we can catch up another time as well. Some other topics.
I'm very open to sort of continuing with some of the other topics you kind of have on the list.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Pleasure, Levi. Thanks a lot.
Take care, Shaul. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.